Docs, there is a version of me that I used to walk into my own practice on Monday morning and I would just feel this dread settling in my chest before I even walked in the front door. And I don't know if it wasn't because I didn't love dentistry, because I did love it, but it was because I knew that whatever went wrong that day, and trust me, something always went wrong. Every fire, every hard conversation, no one else is going to handle it but me. That was leadership to me for almost 20 years, and I got it wrong in 3 specific ways that I want to walk you through right now because I bet at least one of them is running your practice today too. Here are 3 leadership mistakes I will never repeat again. And if you're an owner and everything is still somehow running through you, I made this one for you. The first one is about how available you think you actually need to be. The second one is about the conversation you've probably been avoiding for months without even admitting it to yourself. And the third one took me the longest to see because it wasn't really about what I was doing wrong. It was what I was actually not building in the first place. Welcome to the channel. I'm Dr. Simone Ellis, and I have spent over 17 years building a multiple $1,000,000 practice, and I sold it on my terms. But I promise you, I did not get there by accident, and I definitely didn't get there the first way I tried. So you know I like to keep it real, and doctors, can I ask you something? When your team runs into a real problem, do they come find you immediately? Well, mine did for years actually, and I thought that meant that I was a good leader because I was always available to answer the same damn question over and over again. So I answered it over and over again, and I settled every disagreement between the front desk and the back. I was the one who decided what time we actually left on Friday when the schedule ran long. And what I built wasn't a team. It was just a queue with me standing in front of it every single day. If your team cannot make a decision without you, you have not built leadership. You've built a bottleneck and you're the one that is standing, literally holding it together. Doctors, that is not a team problem. That is definitely a structure problem. And the practice was me. I was the practice. And that was exactly the problem. Now here's where I want you guys to get a little bit uncomfortable because the second mistake isn't about being too available. It's about something I avoided saying out loud for almost a decade. I had this hygienist who was chronically late all the time. She always ran into traffic. It was always a problem. She was great as a hygienist, but she was literally setting the tone off bad every single day. And sometimes it'd be 15 minutes late, sometimes it'd be 20 minutes late, and I never said anything to her directly. I mean, I would be passive aggressive about it. I'd reschedule around her. And I told myself, well, she's the hygienist. She's too valuable to lose over something that I felt like was small. But this is the thing that I realized that as a consultant, you need to tell people this. Every single person on that team that knew she was late, I was setting a horrible tone. They were actually watching what she was doing, and they saw that I wasn't doing anything about it. And then what happened? Well, my team started to actually do the same thing. So I was setting this whole entire terrible standard with it was okay to be late just because I was afraid to lose a great employee. What I realized that I was doing was I was confusing being liked and respected with setting a standard that I was paying for. I literally was paying somebody to be late. I was showing that I wasn't a woman of my word and holding people to a standard. And everybody else that was showing up on time, they definitely were getting resentment. Here's what I would like doctors to take note on. If you're avoiding that one hard conversation, that is not protecting your team. It is teaching your team that your standards are optional. By the way, if you're seeing exactly your own leadership is leaking in this, check out our scorecard. I've mentioned several times in our videos, but what it does is it's gonna walk you through where those gaps are, and the link is below. Now, this next part is where it gets interesting to me because this is a piece that most practice owners skip entirely. Most people in this conversation are going to just stop at communicating better or have the hard conversation, and that's really just the surface. What they don't ask is why the conversation felt so dangerous to have in the first place, and that the answer that most practices are realizing is that there's no structure underneath the owner. So there's no chain of accountability. Everybody runs straight to the doctor. And so the hard conversations feel like you're being on a referendum for the whole relationship because there's no one else holding up this standard. So for my nerds, there's this amazing study out that the Mayo Clinic produced, and it looks directly at how healthcare settings are impacting doctors. And they interviewed almost 4,000 physicians, and their findings were actually surprising to researchers. How burned out the leader personally felt had almost no relationship to how burnt out their team was. What actually was the predicting factor of the team's burnout was their satisfaction on a set specific teachable leadership behaviors. Things like keeping people informed, having real development conversations, recognizing people properly. Not the leader's stress level, the leader's structure. My exhaustion wasn't hurting my team. My lack of real leadership structure was. So I want you to take a second, and if you have an organizational chart, I want you to pull it up. If you don't know what an organizational chart is, it's literally how does your office flow from who they report to into different departments. And when you draw this out, I want you to ask yourself this question. How many of those boxes are actually where a person is having someone to report to, or is the problem that they have no reporting place at all? And if you don't have an org chart, you got to take an opportunity to actually write one. Because for most of my ownership, if I'm honest, I didn't have one. And I was literally in the box where everybody had to report to. I was me, and then everybody else reported to. And then I realized that was why I was so stressed out. If a hygienist was calling out, they called me first. If a team member had an issue with supplies, they talked to me. And then if I had patients to actually treat, I had to talk to them. This is the mistake that took me the longest to actually see, because on the outside, it looked like I was delegating because I was giving people titles, but I had given them titles, but they had no decision-making power. So I want you to think about this. Delegating tasks isn't the same thing as delegating authority. If the decision still has to come back to you, let's be real. You haven't built leadership, you've just built yourself an assistant. I want to give an example of one of my doctors that I coach out in California. She has an orthodontic practice, and it's similar to the size of mine when I was practicing. What happened is that 4 of her team members departed in 18 months, and all of them were talking about, well, they didn't understand what the expectations were. They didn't want her to touch marketing. They didn't touch her schedule. And what we saw is that first, she didn't have a leadership structure. So we call that the CEO filter, where every recurring decision in her practice ran through these 3 questions. Can it be automated? Can it be delegated? And does it actually require me specifically? Less than 30% of what she was actually personally doing really required her. So over the next 12 months, that same office has had now 0 departures, and it wasn't because the work changed. It was because for the first time, the standards didn't live inside her head anymore. They lived inside of a structure that her team could see, they could trust, they could hold it. She has now the same team, the same building, just a completely different architecture underneath it. The practice that only runs when you are standing in it was never built to set you free. It was built to keep you standing there. So 3 mistakes, and honestly, they are all traced back to the same root of issues that I was having. I chose being available over building something who people could actually make decisions without me being at the center. I had created this golden cage. I was avoiding conversations instead of protecting a standard that I cared about, and I handed out tasks without ever handing out the authority that would make them stick. None of this was about me working harder. All 3 of these things came from down to the same thing: structure. You are not a dentist who needs more discipline. You are a CEO who needs a better operating system. And if any of this sounds familiar, I've built something in this movement called the Stress and Leadership Scorecard. It's free, it takes about 10 minutes, and I'll show you specifically where your own leadership structure is leaking time, money, and people right now. The link is in the description. And if you want to even go further, I'm running a live training called the Leadership Lab, where we walk through exact structures that finally let my practice run free without me standing in the middle of it. The link is below. I hope to see you there. Like and subscribe, and check out our next videos.